Another thing that I find interesting about Jung that he, and also not only Jung, but also the psychologists that were like coming up at the time, is this idea of the Western way of seeing the world.
Mm.
Um, because Jung, in a sense, was a little bit more a mystic, and
Mm.
he talk about a lot of ideas that are maybe are not that rational.
Mm.
And but for me, it's super interesting that psychology came about in Germany or the German-speaking countries,
Yeah.
because before the mind was being or the ideas of the mind were not explored in a particular discipline.
Mm.
And there is Freud, there is Jung, and also the father psychology that his name escapes me. Also, a lot of the tradition of psychology was really
Yeah, the German-speaking countries. So and there again, Jung also has a theory.
yes.
um, looking at the history of Europe, um, he said, if you look into the countries that were really conquered by the Romans, like Italy, Spain, France, um, that they operate different than the Germans, which were never really conquered by the Romans, because they were on the other side of the Rhine. They stayed a little bit more primitive in that way. Uh, he says you had the Germanic tribes in Germany living in the forest, living how human beings lived for thousands or 10 thousands of years. And when the Romans came, they basically forced, or the Christians, they basically forced um, the Christian mindset onto them. And it's possible to make people conform, right? So, but it's one thing whether a culture grows out of yourself and out of the population, or something is being put on top. And Jung's view was that you have the Germanic people who, in their heart, were still pagans, but on the outside, they had to become Christian just to operate in the world and to be part of the world. But this rift never really got overcome. So this idea of you have to force yourself to believe something, not something is so convincing that it's coming out of yourself and it's self-evident that it's true, but rather it's you have to force yourself to believe something, and it's a sign that you really, even though it does not make sense, you believe it. He saw there as a source that there's a rift in the former Germanic tribes in the psychology, that you have the conscious side, which is very Christianized, but then the unconscious side, which is still very pagan, which causes layer of civilization and cultural to be very thin. So this is why in Germany, for him, this was uh, thrown off as soon as possible. Like with Protestantism, it's already like, okay, let's get rid of Christianity in that form, and we make it, but a little bit different, right? So he saw psychology and psychologically problems coming up first in this area of Europe because of this very special history. Like we talked before in the beginning, that every culture has a history, and this has still an influence. And he says in the past there was not really an unconscious, and there was no need for psychology. It was first with the death of these metaphysical structures that they're going away, that suddenly people are alone against the unconscious and the collective unconscious, and suddenly it comes up.
What do you mean by these metaphysical structures that went away?
Basically, the death of God, like Nietzsche
Ah, okay.
proclaimed. So that you have the structures, but they lost their, let's say, influence. That people stopped believing in them, maybe in a voluntary or involuntary manner. So suddenly, all the people had individual revelations. Like religion is there to prevent people from having religious experiences. This is the idea of Jung. And when you take that away, suddenly people have all these amazing experiences coming up, and in effort to understand them and to make sense of them, this is in his eyes how psychology was born. but also for the necessity
Wow.
of the modern mind to understand what is happening. Because he says this is really the modern mind. Why is something like this? I want to understand. I want to learn. And many things, let's say cultural in the past or rituals, they're just self-evident. They're just being done because they always have been done. So psychology is just a modern language to explain then these phenomena and also to reconnect people to their past. Because this is also what we see a lot. For example, when people analyze mythology or stories or history through a psychological lens, they try to reconnect what lies in the past with the present because there's value in these things. And psychology is right now the language that we use to try to make it approachable. Like, for example, John Peterson was incredibly successful talking about the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Incredibly, that people watched it for hours. These stories that are thousands of years, even older, some stories 10 thousands of years, and people are completely amazed and engrossed because it's looked through a psychological lens. And this is, in my eyes, why psychology has become so big and created also so much demand for it. Like I have a group with 850 people who really want to learn about Jung and what Jung has to say about psychology. And there are a lot of other people who talked about and had amazing theories and ideas. And people are really drawn to that in all aspects of their lives to understand, like the modern mind, trying to understand why is there something and why is it like that.
If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with more people. This will help the community of the Lar Maestro to continue growing.